Mr. Anderson Podcast.
My podcast show, Mr. Anderson Podcast, on all platforms: Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeart. Tap me in, listen to me, get at me. Mr. Anderson TV News. Mr. Anderson CEO313 on Instagram. I design coats, jackets. Just the jacket you see right here. I do body oils, air fresh, homemade candles, and I'm
AI jackets out now.
Be fake and friendly cause they know I'm lonely. If she don't like me, that bitch gay, trust me, she wanna.
reacting to this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. Mr. Anderson TV News. Let's get it in. I don't like talking through the video, so let's watch it together. This is my first time seeing it.
I'm trying to see how I can get your daddy to pick you up by tomorrow. I'm trying to see how I can get your daddy to pick you up by tomorrow. Hell, I'm trying to do hot girl shit.
When she heard yelling, she was screaming, and I hear boom, 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 boom.
This is Renia Moore, a 16-year-old competitive dancer from Galveston, Texas, who would be arrested and charged with murder after allegedly shooting her own mother multiple times on what should have been just another Thursday evening in September 2025. The grandmother, who was inside the home during the shooting, heard every single gunshot echo through the walls, heard her daughter's final screams, and would later struggle to comprehend how her own granddaughter, a child she helped raise, could commit such an unfathomable act. But before we dive into the chaos of that tragic evening, let me take you back to understand the complicated, turbulent relationship between a mother trying to save her daughter from herself and a teenager who seemed determined to destroy everything in her path.
Fuck your life! Bing bang! If you see these dogs in your front yard, just know upstairs I'm going hard.
Now, Tia Maya Moore wasn't always the woman lying lifeless on that porch. Born on July 17, 1991 in Lamarck, Texas, she had spent years battling her own demons, fighting through relationships marked by betrayal and infidelity, wrestling with substance abuse that threatened to consume her entire existence. But here's the thing that makes this story even more tragic. Tia Moya had turned her life around. In the months leading up to her death, she had found God, found sobriety, found purpose. She celebrated being alcohol-free and drug-free, posting her milestones on social media with the kind of pride that comes from clawing your way back from rock bottom. She was described by those who knew her as spiritual, generous, someone who would literally give you the shirt off their back. She had 5 children, and by all accounts from friends and family members, those kids were her entire world, her reason for breathing, her motivation to stay clean and build a better future.
The motherfucking shit in my life. My motherfucking stomach was.
Tia will give you the shirt literally off of her back. Tia loved her kids, would do anything for her kids. She was very spiritual, very into God, changed her life around for God.
The relationship between Tia Moya and her eldest daughter, Renia, sometimes called Naya or Nia, hadn't always been fractured and broken. In fact, photographs from earlier years show a bond filled with affection and love, with Tia Moya calling her daughter Niapu and my road dog firstborn daughter, posting sweet messages during times when Rania was in California pursuing competitive dancing with her father's family. These were moments of genuine connection, glimpses of what could have been if circumstances had been different, if something hadn't shifted in the foundation of their relationship. But according to family accounts, everything changed when Rania turned 12 years old. That's when the rebellion started and defiance began to take root. This young girl decided she wanted to live an adult life that she wasn't emotionally, mentally, or legally prepared to navigate. Rania started getting tattoos as a minor. She began experimenting with substances. Her social media presence reflected someone trying desperately to appear older, more mature, more worldly than her 12, 13, 14, or 15 years could possibly justify. She had a history of running away from home. There was even a missing person report filed on June 29, 2022, though she was found within 24 hours. One social media post attributed to the teenager stated, "My mama ain't never did nothing for me but gave me life." Family members described her as troubled, out of control, spiraling into behaviors that suggested significant mental health challenges that never properly addressed or treated. Some even speculated that she might be mentally unfit to stand trial, though that determination would ultimately rest with legal and psychiatric evaluations. Tia Moya, for her part, tried everything she knew how to do as a mother. She was strict, but fair, according to her other daughter who defended her mother publicly after the shooting. She took away phones as punishment, restricted access to the outside world when discipline was necessary. She didn't allow boyfriends to have access to her children's private spaces. She was protective, perhaps overprotective in Rania's eyes, trying to keep her daughter from making the same mistakes she herself had made in her younger years. But to a teenager desperate for freedom, desperate to escape what she perceived as imprisonment, these boundaries felt like suffocation.
Mommy, but you aren't 12.
But I look 12. This ain't cute to be looking 12 at my age. That's the point.
And as we'll see, that suffocation would ultimately lead to an explosion of rage that nobody could have truly predicted. The evening of September 11th or 12th, 2025, started like countless other evenings in the Moore household, with tensions simmering just beneath the surface, with mother and daughter locked in their familiar battle of wills. According to some accounts, Tia Moya had grounded Rania, possibly over issues related to a boyfriend, though family members would later dispute some of the specific details surrounding what triggered the final confrontation. What we know for certain is this. At approximately 7:49 in the evening, neighbors in the 5100 block of Avenue Q began hearing raised voices, the sound of an argument escalating beyond the normal parameters of teenage defiance and parental authority.
When she heard yelling, she was screaming, and I hear boom, 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 boom.
Grisela Molina, a neighbor who lived directly across the street from the Moore family, was checking her mail when she heard Tia Moya screaming. And then came the gunshots. 5 shots in rapid succession, the sound reverberating through the neighborhood, shattering the peaceful evening, sending neighbors scrambling for cover, reaching for phones to call 911. Bullet holes would later be discovered not just in the Moore home's walls, but in neighboring houses as well. Now, here's where the family's account becomes particularly chilling and challenges some of the initial narratives that spread across social media. According to statements from Tia Moya's other daughter, who vigorously defended her mother's memory after the shooting, there was no physical fight between mother and daughter. Instead, the daughter stated that Tia Moya simply turned around and screamed when she saw Rania, presumably holding or pointing the gun that would end her life. Imagine the terror, the confusion, the desperate hope that this couldn't possibly be real, that her own child couldn't possibly be about to pull that trigger. Inside the home during these horrifying moments were Tia Moya's mother, the children's grandmother, an uncle, and a cousin. These family members heard everything. They heard the argument escalate and Tia Moya's body hit the porch. And the grandmother, who would later speak about her complete inability to comprehend how her granddaughter could commit such an act, was left to process the impossible reality that one of her grandchildren had just murdered her daughter while other grandchildren watched or listened or tried to hide from the nightmare unfolding in their home.
Tonight at 9, loved ones are speaking out after Galveston police say a mother was shot and killed. They say authorities say by her daughter. Fox 26's Leslie Delasport spoke with the family about how they're processing the pain.
After firing the shots, Rania fled the scene on foot, running away from the home from her mother's dying body. Galveston police arrived quickly, responding to the multiple 911 calls from neighbors who had heard the gunshots and seen the chaos. They found Tia Moya on the porch, surrounded by shell casings and blood, clinging to whatever life remained in her body. Emergency medical services rushed her to the University of Texas Medical Branch emergency room, but their efforts were futile. Tia Moya Moore was pronounced dead. A firearm was recovered near the scene. But the most shocking development came as police were still processing the crime scene, still photographing bullet holes and collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. Rania Moore returned to the home. She came back to the place where she had just committed murder, where police cars were parked, and yellow crime scene tape was being strung, and investigators were documenting her mother's blood. She was taken into custody without incident, without resistance, walking into handcuffs and into a future that would now be defined by this single night of violence. Rania Moore was charged with murder and detained at the Jerry J. Esmond Juvenile Justice Center, held without bond as prosecutors and defense attorneys began the complex process of determining how to handle a case where a 16-year-old stands accused of killing her own mother. As of November 2025, no major public updates on court proceedings have emerged, largely because juvenile cases are protected by different confidentiality standards than adult criminal proceedings. The public may never know the full details of what happens to Rania Moore unless prosecutors decide to try her as an adult, a decision that sparked intense debate across social media platforms where the case gained viral attention.
She's not only heartbroken, but confused.
The last couple of days, I've been feeling like I'm losing my mind. I was questioning, like, why? Why would you do this to your own mama? I just can't believe.
But while the legal system slowly ground forward, the Tia Moya family found themselves fighting a different battle entirely, a battle against misinformation, lies, and character assassination that exploded on TikTok and other social media platforms in the days following the shooting. You see, as news of the murder spread, some users on social media began posting videos suggesting that Tia Moya Moore had been an abusive mother, that she had driven her daughter to violence through her parenting, that Rania had acted in self-defense, or in response to years of trauma inflicted by her mother. These narratives gained traction, accumulating thousands of views and shares and comments from people who had never met the Moore family but felt qualified to judge Tia Moya's parenting from behind their screens. This is where Tia Moya's other daughter, 13-year-old Kiki, stepped forward to defend her mother's memory, posting detailed statements that pushed back against the abuse allegations and provided context that the viral videos conveniently omitted. In these posts, Kiki stated clearly, "My mother never abused us. My sister lied." She explained that Tia Moya's discipline was reasonable and appropriate, taking away phones, restricting outside privileges, setting boundaries that any responsible parent might establish when dealing with a rebellious teenager. She emphasized that her mother punished Rania by taking her phone and not allowing her to go outside, standard teenage consequences that hardly constitute abuse. Kiki's posts revealed the true nature of what had been happening in the Moore household in the years leading up to the murder. She stated that Rania wanted to be grown and started trying to live her own life at the ripe age of 12, attempting to engage in adult activities and relationships that she was nowhere near ready to handle. Tia Moya had protected her daughter from herself, from predators, from bad decisions that could derail her entire future. But in Rania's eyes, this protection was oppression. This love was control. And that festering resentment, that anger at boundaries and consequences had ultimately culminated in murder.
Kiki also clarified that the shooting had nothing to do with any romantic relationship, stating, "This is my mother and my sister, and it does not have anything to do with the dude." This contradicted early reports and speculation that the argument had been about Rania being grounded over a boyfriend. The reality, according to the family who lived through it, was both simpler and more complicated. A mother trying desperately to parent a teenager who refused to be parented, who saw any attempt at guidance as an attack on her autonomy, who ultimately responded to consequences with the most extreme violence imaginable. Adding to the confusion in the immediate aftermath of the shooting was a case of mistaken identity that spread like wildfire across TikTok. Early posts confused 13-year-old Kiki with 16-year-old Rania, with some users sharing family photos and videos of the younger sister while claiming she was the one who had killed Tia Moya. This mistake was particularly cruel because Kiki had a public presence on social media through videos with her mother, making her image readily available and easily misidentified. Pages eventually featured corrections stating, "It was not her 13-year-old daughter Kiki, her daughter Rania did it." But the damage had been done. Kiki, already processing the loss of her mother and the incarceration of her sister, now had to deal with being falsely accused of matricide across social media platforms.
Troubled than a child is troubled. You can only help them so much. I was so mad at first, but as I got to talking to people and actually just thinking about what might have really happened, or mental health is real.
Alicia Gissinger, described as a childhood friend and cousin-like figure to the family, spoke publicly about Tia Moya's character and the family's grief. She reinforced what others had said about Tia Moya being generous, spiritual, and devoted to her children. She acknowledged the complexity of the situation, noting that mental health challenges are real, and that troubled teenagers sometimes reach breaking points despite their family's best efforts to help them. This compassionate framing stood in stark contrast to the judgmental comments flooding social media, where armchair psychologists and parenting experts with no connection to the case felt entitled to diagnose what went wrong and assign blame. A GoFundMe campaign was established to help cover Tia Moya's funeral expenses, a painful reminder that in addition to processing grief and trauma, the family now faced the financial burden of burying a loved one who died far too young and in the most violent circumstances imaginable. The Moore family tragedy left 4 younger children without their mother and without their eldest sister, who now sits in a juvenile detention center facing murder charges. The grandmother, who is present during the shooting and heard every horrifying moment, must now help raise the remaining children while processing her own trauma and grief. The neighborhood in Galveston that was described as typically calm and quiet must now contend with the knowledge that such violence erupted in their midst, that bullet holes in neighboring homes serve as permanent reminders of the night a daughter killed her mother just a few doors down. Authorities have not publicly confirmed a definitive motive for the shooting, stating only that the investigation is ongoing. This lack of official explanation has left room for speculation, for theories, for social media users to fill in the blanks with their own narratives about abuse, mental health, teenage rebellion, or parenting failures. The case has sparked broader conversations about adolescent mental health, particularly regarding impulse control issues in teenagers and the need for better support systems. Some commenters have called for Rania to be tried as an adult, arguing that the premeditated nature of retrieving a gun and firing multiple shots demonstrates an understanding of her actions that warrant adult consequences. Others point to her age, her reported mental health struggles, and the possibility that she was non-compos mentis, or mentally unfit, as reasons to handle the case within the juvenile system, with a focus on rehabilitation rather than pure punishment.
But here's the part where this case becomes bigger than just headlines, bigger than just one tragic family in Galveston. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable question of what justice should look like when the killer is a child. Because whether Rania should face adult punishment, or whether she belongs in a system built around rehabilitation, depends entirely on how society chooses to define accountability for young offenders. And the truth is, America has never fully agreed on that answer. On one side, there's a growing body of psychological research showing that the adolescent brain, especially the parts responsible for judgment, impulse control, and decision-making, is nowhere near fully developed at 16. Teenagers feel emotions more intensely, react more impulsively, and struggle to assess long-term consequences. Neuroscientists say the frontal lobe doesn't mature until age 25, sometimes even later. From that perspective, supporters of rehabilitation argue that 16-year-olds are fundamentally different from adults, not just emotionally, but biologically. They're still forming identity, still building moral reasoning, still learning how to regulate the storms inside their own heads. And when you pair that scientific fact with what people close to the Moore family said about Rania's mental state, her impulsivity, her defiance, her possible untreated psychological struggles, you start to see a picture that's far more complicated than teenager commits murder, therefore lock her up. To them, the question isn't whether she should be punished, it's how she should be punished, and what purpose that punishment should serve. Should it be about revenge? Or should it be about breaking the cycle so tragedies like this don't happen again? Advocates of rehabilitation point out that juvenile facilities, at least in theory, are built around therapy, education, and reintegration. They focus on helping the teenager understand their actions, build coping mechanisms, address trauma, and eventually return to society as someone who will never repeat the same mistakes. And with early intervention, many do improve. Many even thrive. But that's only one side of the argument. On the other end of the spectrum are those who look at the facts of this case and feel something very different: fear, outrage, and an instinctive pull toward accountability in its harshest form. They argue that the number of shots fired, the fact that the gun was retrieved, the lack of hesitation, and the return to the crime scene all point to a level of awareness inconsistent with the idea of a child who didn't know what she was doing. They believe that some crimes, no matter how young the perpetrator is, cross a moral line so devastating that adult consequences are not only appropriate, but necessary. To them, this wasn't a tragic accident caused by a developing brain. This was matricide, a deliberate act of violence against the very person responsible for giving life, protection, and guidance. And they worry that keeping the case in the juvenile system risks sending the wrong message, that extreme violence doesn't carry extreme consequences if you're under 18. Which do you think?
That's fucked up. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you're thinking in comments. To the next one, Mr. Anderson TV News, I'm out.